What if the person you trusted most was the architect of your downfall? What if fate, in its cruelest twist, brought you face to face with them a decade later? Not as an equal, but as a forgotten ghost. This is a story about a lie that built an empire and the truth that threatened to bring it all crashing down. It's a journey into the dark heart of betrayal, where a simple act of kindness unearths a decade of secrets and a security camera becomes the silent witness to a long-awaited reckoning. Prepare for a story so intense you'll feel every moment of suspense. 10 years ago, Ethan Hayes was a rising star in the tech world. Alongside his charismatic business partner, Arthur Blackwood, he co-founded a revolutionary software company poised to change the restaurant industry forever. Ethan was the genius coder, the quiet engine behind their success, but on the eve of their biggest triumph he was framed for massive financial fraud and sent to prison. He lost everything: his company, his future, and his fiancée, Chloe. Meanwhile, Arthur Blackwood used the company's technology to build a restaurant empire, becoming one of Chicago's most powerful men. He married Chloe, telling her Ethan had tragically died in prison. They now have a son, Leo, who knows nothing of his mother's past or the ghost who is about to re-enter their lives. The scream of tires echoed through the canyon of downtown Chicago skyscrapers. A sleek black SUV had run a red light, its driver oblivious, deep in a phone call. Right in its path, a 10-year-old boy on a gleaming new bicycle wobbled, his eyes wide with a terror that froze him in place. Time seemed to warp and stretch. For the man sitting on the cold curb, the world snapped into sharp focus. Years of listless despair vanished, replaced by a primal instinct he thought he'd lost. He moved without thinking, a blur of faded denim and raw survival. He launched himself off the pavement, his body a shield, and tackled the boy, pulling him back from the brink of oblivion. The SUV's horn bled a furious, useless note as it screeched past, missing them by inches. The bicycle crumpled under its wheels with a sickening crunch of metal. The boy was safe, trembling in the stranger's arms, the scent of rain and asphalt filling the air. "Hey, kid! You okay? You with me?" The man's voice was rough, a gravelly sound unused to gentle words. He helped the boy Leo to his feet. Leo was shaking, his expensive tracksuit now scuffed with dirt, but he was unharmed. The driver of the SUV shouted an angry curse out his window before speeding away, disappearing into the relentless flow of Chicago traffic. The homeless man, Ethan, looked down at the boy, whose initial fear was already being replaced by a surge of adrenaline and awe. You saved me," Leo stammered, looking up at the man with the haunted eyes and the thick, unkempt beard that hid half his face. "You just gotta watch the lights, kid," Ethan said, his gaze already drifting, ready to melt back into the anonymity of the city. He had acted on impulse, a ghost of the man he used to be. Now he wanted nothing more than to disappear again, to retreat from a world that had long since cast him out. "No, wait!" Leo grabbed the sleeve of Ethan's worn jacket. "You have to let me thank you. My dad, he's super rich. He owns restaurants all over the city. He'll give you a reward, a big one." Ethan almost laughed. A reward. As if money could patch the holes in his life. He looked at the boy's earnest, privileged face and felt a pang of something he couldn't name. The kid was persistent, a quality his father no doubt encouraged. "What restaurant?" Ethan asked, his curiosity a flickering ember. "The Gilded Cage. It's the best one. It's right over there." Leo pointed a block down towards a magnificent building with a polished brass entrance and valets in crisp uniforms. A cold dread washed over Ethan. He knew that name. He knew that building. He had sketched its original logo on a napkin a lifetime ago. The name on the brass plaque was a ghost from his own past, Blackwood. Against all his better judgment, Ethan found himself being led by the boy toward the imposing entrance of the Gilded Cage. Passers-by in designer clothes cast disdainful glances at the strange pair, the immaculate child, and the dishevelled phantom. At the door, two broad-shouldered security guards in sharp suits immediately stepped forward, blocking their path. "Whoa there, pal! I think you're lost," one of them said, his voice low and menacing, his hand resting near his side. "This isn't a shelter." His eyes were cold, scanning Ethan from head to toe, dismissing him as trash to be swept away. The air crackled with tension. Ethan's hands clenched into fists in his pockets. He was used to this treatment, the casual cruelty of being invisible. But in front of the boy, it felt like a fresh wound. He was about to turn and walk away, to vanish as he always did. "He's with me," Leo said, his voice ringing with an authority that belied his age. The guards looked down at the boy, their expressions shifting from hostility to surprise and recognition. This was the boss's son. "Leo, what's going on here?" The first guard, Frank, asked, his tone softening. "This man just saved my life. A car almost hit me. I'm taking him to see my dad." The guards exchanged a look of disbelief. The idea of this street-worn man being a hero was as foreign as the thought of him dining inside. "I'll just wait out here," Ethan muttered, the weight of their stares pressing down on him. "No way," Leo insisted, his grip tightening on Ethan's jacket. "My dad has to thank you. Come on." He pulled Ethan past the stunned guards and into the opulent lobby, a world of polished marble, hushed conversations, and the faint, delicious scent of money. The interior of the gilded cage was a monument to success. Towering floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers, and walls adorned with modern art. It was a world away from the gritty alleys and cold shelters that had been Ethan's reality for years. Leo left him standing awkwardly by the coat check and disappeared up a grand, sweeping staircase. Minutes later, a man descended. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with silvering temples and a watch that cost more than Ethan had earned in his entire life. It was Arthur Blackwood. He looked older, harder, but it was unmistakably him. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Arthur's eyes swept over Ethan with a flicker of annoyance and complete non-recognition. To him, Ethan was just another piece of human debris his son had dragged in. The beard, the grime, the broken posture. They were the perfect disguise. Arthur listened impatiently as Leo recounted the story. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture that looked more like ownership than affection. "All right, son, that's enough. Go wait in the office." After Leo left, Arthur pulled out a thick wallet. "Look, I appreciate what you did for my boy. Here's $500. Now, if you'll excuse me." He tried to press the bills into Ethan's hand, a transaction to make the problem go away. But Ethan didn't move. He didn't take the money. He just stared, his mind reeling. 10 years. 10 years of hell. And this man, his betrayer, didn't even recognize him. "I don't want your money," Ethan heard himself say. Arthur's carefully constructed patience snapped. "What do you want, then? A medal?" A voice from behind them, Leo's voice, piped up. "Give him a job, Dad. You're always saying people need a hand up, not a hand out." Arthur was cornered. In front of his staff, with his son's heroic narrative hanging in the air, he couldn't just throw the man out. It would be bad for his image. He sighed, a mask of magnanimity slipping over his frustration. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. He snapped his fingers and the restaurant manager appeared instantly at his side. "Boris, find something for this gentleman. A janitor? Dishwasher? Something in the back. Get him a uniform and put him on the night shift." He turned back to Ethan, his eyes cold and dismissive. "You start tonight. Don't make me regret this." And with that, Arthur Blackwood turned and walked away, already forgetting the face of the man whose life he had single-handedly destroyed. For Ethan, it was a surreal nightmare. He was being offered a job cleaning toilets in the empire he had helped build. The basement of the gilded cage was a labyrinth of steel and steam, a world away from the luxury upstairs. Ethan was given a drab, grey uniform and shown to a small, windowless utility closet that would serve as his break room. The air was thick with the smell of bleach and old grease. This was his new reality. Humiliation warred with a grim sense of purpose. He needed this. He needed a roof, however temporary, and a way to stay off the streets as the bitter Chicago winter approached. His first shift was a blur of mopping floors, hauling heavy trash bags and scrubbing grime from the kitchen tiles. He worked in silence, his mind a whirlwind. He saw the waste, the sheer excess of the place, and felt a bitter irony. Every perfectly plated dish that went out was a product of the system he had designed, a system now owned by his nemesis. A memory surfaced, sharp and vivid. A cramped dorm room at Northwestern, the air buzzing with excitement. He and a younger, more idealistic Arthur Blackwood are hunched over a whiteboard covered in complex algorithms and flowcharts. "This is it, man," Arthur had said, his eyes gleaming. "This software, it's going to make us kings. Not just code, Ethan. A key to unlock the whole industry." Ethan had been the architect, the one who saw the intricate patterns and built the elegant logic. Arthur was the dreamer, the salesman who could paint a vision so compelling that people couldn't help but believe. Back then, they were a team. They were brothers, ready to conquer the world together. The memory was so clear it was painful, a ghost of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He scrubbed the floor harder, trying to erase the image from his mind. Miles away, in a sprawling mansion in the wealthy suburb of Kenilworth, Arthur Blackwood reviewed the restaurant's quarterly reports. The numbers were down, not by much, but enough to annoy him. He thrived on growth, on conquest. Stagnation was a form of failure. He poured himself a glass of expensive scotch, the amber liquid catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a manicured lawn. He suspected employee theft, a stolen bottle of wine here, a comped meal for a friend there. It was death by 1,000 cuts. He made a decision. He would upgrade the security system at the Gilded Cage, high-definition cameras in every corner, every hallway, every storage room. He would monitor it all himself, from his phone, from his office. He would find the leak and plug it. He trusted no one. It was a lesson he had learned long ago. Back in the restaurant's underbelly, Ethan's quiet diligence began to set him apart. He wasn't like the other transient workers who drifted in and out. He was methodical, efficient, and surprisingly intelligent. Maria, the warm, matronly head of the kitchen, noticed it first. She started leaving a plate of hot food for him at the end of his shift. "You need to eat, mijo," she'd say with a kind smile. "A man can't run on air." Ethan, unaccustomed to such simple kindness, would just nod, his throat too tight to speak. He also earned the grudging respect of Frank, the head of security who had initially tried to throw him out. Frank saw that Ethan wasn't a threat. He was just a man trying to survive. One late night during a lull, Frank offered him a cup of coffee. "Tough break, whatever happened to you," Frank said, a rare moment of empathy. A few days later, Leo appeared in the basement. He had sought Ethan out, a determined look on his face. "I brought something," he announced, holding up a small, magnetic chessboard. "Do you know how to play?" Ethan looked at the board, and for the first time in a long time, a genuine smile touched his lips. He had loved chess. It was a game of logic, of strategy, a battle of wits, where the smartest player won. It was everything his life was not. They set up the board on an overturned crate in the noisy break room, a small island of calm in the chaos. Ethan, rusty at first, quickly found his old rhythm. He didn't just play. He taught. He explained the moves, the strategies, the art of thinking 10 steps ahead. Leo was a quick learner, his young mind absorbing everything like a sponge. As they played, Leo began to open up. He talked about his life, a gilded cage of private tutors, scheduled playdates, and a father who was always too busy for him. "My dad, he's always on his phone. Even when he's here, he's not really here," Leo confessed, moving his knight. "He never taught me chess. He said it was a waste of time." A fresh wave of anger, cold and sharp, washed over Ethan. Arthur was neglecting his own son. His son! The thought was a dagger. He looked at Leo, at his bright, curious eyes, and saw a reflection he didn't expect. He saw a part of himself. He pushed the thought away. It was too dangerous, too painful to consider. "Well, your dad's wrong," Ethan said, his voice firm. "Chess teaches you how to see the whole board. It's the most important skill you can have." Another memory, this one colder. The sleek boardroom of a venture capital firm. The air thick with the smell of new leather and old money. The offer on the table was staggering, enough to set them up for life. Ethan had urged caution. We should read the fine print, Arthur. This gives them too much control. But Arthur was mesmerized by the number. His eyes were wide with a hunger that bordered on mania. Control! We'll have so much money we can buy control, he had argued. This is our shot, Ethan. Don't you dare get cold feet on me now. It was their first real fight, a crack in the foundation of their partnership. Looking back, Ethan realized it wasn't a crack. It was a chasm that had been there all along. Arthur had never seen him as a partner. He had seen him as a tool, a brilliant tool to be used and eventually discarded. The new security system was installed. Dozens of tiny discreet cameras, their unblinking eyes now covering every inch of the gilded cage. Arthur sat in his home office, a large monitor displaying a grid of live feeds. He swiped through them on his tablet, a digital god overseeing his domain. He watched the bartenders, the servers, the dishwashers. It was late and the night shift was underway. He zoomed in on the main kitchen hallway. He saw the new janitor, the one his son had insisted on hiring, methodically sweeping the floor. There was something about the man's posture, the efficiency of his movements, that was strangely familiar. It was bugging him. This was no ordinary vagrant. He brought up the employee file. The name was John Smith, a pathetic alias. The photo was a blurry, low-resolution shot. It wasn't enough. He needed to know more. One evening, while cleaning the manager's office, Ethan saw it. On the wall was a framed cover of Chicago Business Monthly. The headline read, Arthur Blackwood, the King of Chicago Cuisine. And there he was, smiling, confident, a titan of industry. The man on the cover was the same man from his memories, the same man who had stood by and watched as his life was torn apart. The sight of it, so bold and unapologetic, was like a physical blow. The air turned to ice in his lungs. All the pieces slammed into place. The name, the restaurants, the cruel irony of his new job. This wasn't just a random act of fate. This was a direct, brutal connection to his past. He wasn't just working in any restaurant. He was working in the heart of his enemy's empire, a ghost in the machine he himself had built. The memory of his arrest flooded back, a torrent of blue and red flashing lights and shouting voices. He remembered the cold, metallic click of handcuffs on his wrists. He remembered the confusion on his colleagues' faces. But most of all, he remembered Arthur's face. Arthur had been there, feigning shock and concern. He had put a hand on Ethan's shoulder and whispered, "Don't worry, man. It's a mistake. I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll get you out of this." It was the ultimate betrayal. The Judas kiss. Arthur had orchestrated the entire thing, planting the digital evidence so flawlessly that it was irrefutable. He had used Ethan's own genius against him, turning his complex coding skills into the very weapon that would convict him. The memory left him shaking with a rage so pure and cold, it felt like it could freeze his blood. In her quiet, cavernous home, Chloe Blackwood felt a familiar sense of unease. Her life was perfect on paper. A wealthy, powerful husband, a beautiful home, a wonderful son. But it was a hollow perfection. Arthur was a stranger to her now, a man consumed by his business and his own ego. Their marriage was a business arrangement, an empty contract. She wandered into Arthur's study, a room she rarely entered. On his desk, she saw an old photo album. She opened it and a picture slipped out. It was from college. A young Arthur, a laughing Chloe, and Ethan. Bright, brilliant, gentle Ethan, the man she had loved. A wave of grief, still potent after all these years, washed over her. Arthur had told her Ethan died in a prison fight, a year into his sentence. He had been her shoulder to cry on, her rock. He had picked up the pieces. Also, she thought. Feeling a sudden, inexplicable urge to escape the suffocating silence of her home, Chloe made a decision. "Leo," she called out, "get your coat. We're going to go have dinner at Dad's restaurant, just the two of us. Leo, thrilled at the unexpected outing, quickly agreed. For Chloe, it was an attempt to reclaim something, to find a sliver of joy in the empire that had become her cage. She wanted to feel the simple pleasure of a nice meal, to connect with her son in a place that wasn't haunted by the ghosts of her marriage. She had no idea that she was walking directly towards a ghost, far more real, a ghost she believed had been buried a decade ago. Their car pulled up to the valet, and Chloe, holding her son's hand, walked through the heavy brass doors of the gilded cage. Ethan was in the main dining hall, collecting trash bins, keeping his head down as he always did. The dinner rush was in full swing, a symphony of clinking glasses and muted conversation. He heard a woman's voice, a voice that cut through the noise and struck a chord deep in his memory. It was a voice from another life. He looked up, and his world tilted on its axis. Standing by the host stand, bathed in the warm golden light of the chandelier, was Chloe. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, his Chloe, and holding her hand was Leo. Time seemed to stop. The sounds of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. All he could see was her. All he could feel was the crushing weight of 10 stolen years. She turned her head, her eyes scanning the room, and then they met his. Her polite smile froze. Chloe's breath caught in her throat. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. The man in the janitor's uniform, the beard, the weariness in his eyes. But it was him. It was his posture, the set of his shoulders. It was Ethan. "Ethan," she whispered, the name a fragile, impossible sound on her lips. She took a step forward, her hand flying to her mouth. The blood drained from her face. It couldn't be. He was dead. Arthur had told her he was dead. Ethan stood frozen, the trash bin forgotten in his hand. He looked from Chloe's face, a mask of shock and disbelief, down to the boy holding her hand. Leo. He did the math. The timeline. The boy's age. He looked into Leo's eyes, the same bright, intelligent eyes he saw in his own reflection every morning, and in that gut-wrenching, heart-stopping moment he knew. He's mine! The question was a raw, broken whisper, meant only for him, but Chloe heard it. Arthur, frustrated, was still monitoring the cameras from his study. The background check on John Smith had come back with nothing, a dead end. This only fueled his paranoia. Who was this man? He switched to the live feed from the restaurant's lobby. And then he saw it. The janitor. His wife, Chloe. His son, Leo. They were standing together, locked in a tableau of impossible shock. He saw the look on Chloe's face, a look he had never seen before. He zoomed in, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw the janitor's mouth form the words. He saw Chloe's reaction. The lie, his carefully constructed world, was unravelling right before his eyes. A primal fear, cold and absolute, seized him. He strode to the heavy safe hidden behind a painting, his hands trembling as he entered the combination. He pulled out a sleek, black handgun. He had to end this. Now. "We need to talk. Not here," Ethan said, his voice low and urgent, pulling Chloe and a confused Leo towards the back hallway that led to the offices. Just as they slipped out of sight of the dining room, Arthur burst through the front doors, his face a thunderous mask of fury. The staff stared in shock as their boss, wild-eyed and breathing heavily, stormed past them. He didn't care about appearances anymore. He only had one goal. He threw open his office door to find them there. Ethan, Chloe, and the boy. "Get away from my family," Arthur snarled, raising the gun, its black metal gleaming under the office lights. Chloe gasped, pulling Leo behind her. But Ethan was calm. The chaos of prison had forged him into something new. Fear was a luxury he could no longer afford. He had faced down men with shivs in dark corners. A pampered coward with a gun was nothing. "Your family, Arthur?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "You mean my fiancé and my son?" Arthur's finger tightened on the trigger. "I should have made sure you were dead. I paid them enough." It was a confession, spat out in a torrent of rage and panic. As Arthur took another step, Ethan moved. He was faster, more fluid than Arthur could have ever imagined. In one swift motion, he knocked the gun from Arthur's hand, sending it skittering across the polished floor. He twisted Arthur's arm behind his back and slammed him against his own mahogany desk. The fight was over before it began. "It's over, Art," Ethan said, his breath hot against Arthur's ear. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small digital audio recorder, its red light blinking steadily. "Every word, it's all here." Frank, the security guard, had seen Arthur storm in with a bulge under his jacket and had immediately called the police. Now, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Officers swarmed into the office, their weapons drawn. The scene they found was one of quiet devastation. Arthur Blackwood, the powerful tycoon, was a broken man, held against his desk by a janitor. Chloe was holding her son, her face streaked with tears of terror, relief, and a decade of grief. The police took Arthur into custody, his blustering threats and denials falling on deaf ears as they listened to the crystal-clear confession on Ethan's recorder. As they led him away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him, Ethan, Chloe, and Leo stood together, a fractured family taking the first tentative step out of the ruins of a 10-year lie. The scandal was explosive, dominating the Chicago news for weeks. The story of the framed tech genius, the stolen company, the fake death, and the dramatic reunion was the stuff of legends. Ethan's name was officially cleared, with a massive settlement from the state for his wrongful conviction and control of Arthur's frozen assets. He was suddenly a wealthy man again. But the money was secondary. He had something far more valuable. He had his family. The process of getting to know Leo, his own son, was a slow, beautiful journey. They played chess. They went to baseball games at Wrigley Field. They started to build the bond that had been stolen from them. Chloe and Ethan, older and scarred but wiser, began to rediscover the love that had never truly died, a love that had been buried under years of lies and grief. A few months later, Ethan stood before the staff of the Gilded Cage. He was clean-shaven, the scar on his cheek now a faint white line. He wore a simple but well-fitting suit, looking every bit the leader he was born to be. The restaurant was now his. "My name is Ethan Hayes," he began, his voice clear and strong. "Some of you knew me as John the Janitor. I want to thank those of you who showed me kindness when I had nothing." He looked directly at Maria and Frank, who smiled back, their faces beaming with pride. "This restaurant was built on a lie, but from today forward, it will be run with honesty and respect. We're going to build something new here, something better, together." A spontaneous round of applause erupted. It was the dawn of a new era, one built not on a gilded cage, but on a foundation of second chances. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan, Chloe, and Leo were walking through Millennium Park. Leo was chattering excitedly about a new coding project he was working on, his mind as brilliant and curious as his father's. Chloe slipped her hand into Ethan's, her smile radiant. They were a family, whole and complete. As they passed by the iconic Cloud Gate sculpture, Ethan saw a man huddled on a bench, his face etched with the same hopelessness Ethan knew so well. Without a word, Ethan walked over and discreetly pressed a folded $100 bill into the man's hand. "Hang in there," he said softly. The man looked up, stunned. Ethan simply nodded and walked back to his family. He had been to the bottom and back. He had regained his life, his love, and his honor, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would never forget where he came from. A year later, the restaurant, now renamed The Phoenix, was more successful than ever. It was known not just for its food, but for its culture of fairness and community. Ethan had implemented profit sharing for all employees, from the head chef to the dishwashers. On their first anniversary, the staff threw a surprise party for him. Maria presented him with a cake, and Frank gave a short, heartfelt speech. "To Ethan," he said, raising his glass, "the best boss we've ever had. A man who knows that your title doesn't define your worth." Ethan looked around at the smiling faces, his family, his real family. He looked at Chloe, who was holding their new baby girl, a tiny, perfect symbol of their new beginning. He had found his way home. He was no longer a ghost, but a man reborn from the ashes of his past, stronger and more whole than ever before. In the end, Arthur Blackwood's empire, built on a foundation of lies, collapsed under the weight of a single truth. And Ethan Hayes, who had lost everything, discovered that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or prestige, but in love, integrity, and the strength to reclaim your own story. He didn't just get his life back. He built a new one, better and more meaningful than the one he lost. Justice, it seems, can sometimes be delayed, but for those who hold on to hope, it is never truly denied. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story. If it moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel for more powerful narratives, and leaving a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Ethan's journey resonated with you the most?